Hello guys, welcome to today's video. I'm here to talk to you about my birth story, and I just wanted to give you a cute little look at Arlo really quick. She is 3 weeks old and she is actually going to be nursing during this whole video. She's sleeping right now because we are at the end of filming, but I just wanted to give you a heads up. The angle is probably not wonderful, but it was the only time that I had some quiet time to talk about the birth story, so let's get into it. And if you want to see more videos with Arlo, definitely subscribe and let's go. Hey guys, welcome to today's video. I'm really excited to finally share my birth story with you, and hopefully I'm not talking too quiet. I do have Arlo, my 3-week-old baby, nursing down here. I can't honestly tell if you guys can see, but I'm just kind of hoping not, because she does pop her head off sometimes when I'm talking, and so I don't want to offend anyone. But this is the only time I have found to film and talk about my birth story, and I want to get it out before I forget little details. So I'm going to hop right into the day. So on the late evening of September 16th, which was a Sunday night, I got out of the shower and was getting dressed, and I thought that it seemed like there was a little gush of liquid, but I was like, well, like maybe I just didn't dry off all the way. I don't know, it's a weird thing. It wasn't enough water to make me for sure. So because I was questioning myself and no more liquid was like gushing out or anything, I decided to just go to bed. I was not having contractions at the time, and I just knew that if I were to go in and if it had been my water, they were most likely going to give me 24 hours or talk about induction right away. And you know, if it was that, I wanted to be able to give my body a chance to start up on its own, and I really wasn't even sure that it was my water. My son was also sleeping in his bed and he had school the next day, so it just seemed like, honestly, kind of a hassle, and I knew there wasn't a risk of infection if I wasn't getting checked, and so I felt fine with going to bed and waiting until either I woke up with contractions, woke up with a gush of water, or, you know, woke up just knowing that I needed to go into the hospital, I guess. So, we woke up on Monday morning pretty early and got my son ready for school, and I was still definitely leaking water, and I just knew, I was just like, this has to be my water. So Monday morning came, and I realized that I was definitely leaking water, and there was a couple times that I did get up during the night where it just seemed like it had to be my water, but at the same time, it wasn't gushing out. So anyways, we decided to get Alyster to school, and Hans and I went in and we thought we'll just get checked. We brought all of our stuff just in case, and I feel like in the back of my head I knew that my water had broke, but I just didn't want to be so sure and then feel silly and have it not be that. So anyways, we went in, and I had called prior to going in and I let them know I was coming in, so it was really quick to get checked in and everything. And basically they said they were going to go ahead and hook me up to some monitors and do a test that would show if my water broke or not. It was kind of like a pregnancy test. It would show positive or, you know, negative. And sure enough, my water had broke, and I was just like, it just seemed so surreal, because I was just like, what in the world? Because a while back in my pregnancy, I actually told Hans, I said, for some reason, I feel like I'm going to go into labor before my due date, and I feel like my water's going to break. And I said, I know those are both not likely to happen. Most people don't go before their due date, and a lot of people don't have their water break, you know, before going into labor. But I just told him I had this feeling, and I felt that way throughout the whole pregnancy. So it was so weird. So anyways, since my contractions still had not started, they suggested me walking around for a while. I was dilated to a 4 when we checked in, so I mean, that was a good starting point, I suppose, but I was not in any pain or having regular contractions. I was having a lot of irregular contractions, and for the last week I was having lots of irregular contractions that definitely hurt but weren't, you know, consistent. So I started walking around and sitting on the yoga ball, just trying to get things to happen, and my doctor said that, you know, if things weren't going to start happening on their own, that she would want to start Pitocin, and induce me, and I knew that was coming, and I was okay with that. That was, why I ended up going into the hospital, getting checked, not waiting any longer. I didn't personally feel comfortable waiting any longer, questioning it, and so I think it was around 11 a.m. They came in and said that they were going to start Pitocin because my contractions were just not picking up at all. And again, I was okay with that. So the rest of the day honestly kind of dragged along. My contractions were pretty regular. They were painful, but it just didn't seem like a whole lot was happening. They weren't like so painful that it seemed like things were, coming to an end. And so around 4 o'clock, so several hours later, I asked if I could just be checked. I was starting to feel pain, and I knew I was going to get an epidural, so I didn't really want to wait until the last minute to get it, but I also didn't want to get it too soon. I just wanted to know that things had progressed, and I assumed since I was on Pitocin that it had to have. So the doctor said, okay, we'll go ahead and check you. So it was a nurse, I guess, she could not find my cervix, and she spent a while trying to find it, and it was very painful. She said that, it was kind of odd, and so she said, do you mind if I call another nurse in here? I've never had this happen. And I was like, okay. I was a little worried, but not really worried. I was just like, it was painful. So another nurse came in. She was the one who checked me when I had first came in. She found my cervix pretty right away, I guess. Sorry guys, I'm working on not much sleep. So she goes to check me, and she too could not find my cervix. So then they called my doctor, and my doctor came in, and she too could not find my cervix. I was very frustrated at this point, because obviously it wasn't like super close time to pushing or anything, but I wanted to know if I had progressed, and it was frustrating to me, and I thought it was odd that they could not find my cervix. So little did I know, my doctor suspected that Arlo might have flipped and was breech, and I guess that could have moved where my cervix was positioned. And so she ordered an ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech came in, and luckily Arlo was still head down, but her head was facing to the side, and so I guess because of her positioning, that had to do with why my cervix was not where it was supposed to be. And so they said, we really need you to get up and move around a lot, bounce on the yoga ball, just lots of upright positions. By this time I was pretty tired, and I was starting to be in kind of a lot of pain. So, I was like, okay, of course. I started walking and sitting on the yoga ball, and things were getting really painful. And then soon after they checked me again, and I was still at a 4, like 6 hours later. So because I was still at a 4, I just didn't feel like getting an epidural at this point was a good idea, because I knew that it could slow things down, but I was really starting to be in a lot of pain, and I was just concerned as to why the heck why I hadn't been progressing with Pitocin, and with all of the increased pain. And so I kept walking around, moving around, and I was starting to be in so much pain. I was screaming, and I just said, I need the epidural at this point. It was really painful. I was frustrated knowing that I was only at a 4, but I had to get it because things were starting to hurt really, really bad. So I got the epidural, and they checked me about 20 minutes later, because I think that's when I said I was starting to feel pressure, even though, it would be odd to feel pressure so soon after getting an epidural and being at a 4, but randomly I was at an 8. So I had progressed super quick after doing that last bout of walking and bouncing on the ball, and that was really all it took to, I guess, get her head in the right position to where I could actually dilate. So I was at an 8, which was awesome. I think around this time it was probably around 6 o'clock, something like that. And so I called my mom and sister and told them to come up because they were going to be there for the birth, and I said, I think things are getting closer. At this time, my doctor came in to check me, and I don't think she would check for dilation. She just was checking to see how things were going and whatnot. And we all assumed that I was going to probably be pushing out a baby pretty soon, but little did I know, things kind of stood still for a little bit longer, and Arlo's heart rate started going down pretty low into the 40s every time I would have a contraction. And it was at the point where my contractions had begun being on top of one another, and so there wasn't a lot of time for her heart rate to come up. And so my doctor was pretty concerned at this point, but I wasn't at the point where I could start pushing her out, so my doctor honestly started talking about a C-section. This was a little frustrating because I didn't want to have a C-section. I wanted to have a vaginal birth. I mean, of course, I guess that's maybe an obvious thing to say, but of course I wanted Arlo to be safe and I wanted things to be okay. But sometimes I feel like it's a little hard to know if your doctors are pushing things because it really is medically necessary or because they're in a hurry. And sadly enough, as much as I liked my doctor, I feel like she was definitely on her own schedule. However, I do know that, there was something going on with Arlo's heart, and it was really, really scary to see it go down so far, or so low. Sorry, guys. So anyways, we basically just kind of waited out the next couple hours, and things were really scary. I had to wear some oxygen. I was shaking uncontrollably, which I think is either from the epidural or just like that rush of hormones before you are getting ready to push. And they were having me move into all kinds of positions. They wanted me to be on all fours, but I had an epidural and I could not feel my legs one bit, so this was extremely hard. I had to hold my body up with just my arms. However, I had a lovely team of people who were helping. My sister included was also helping hold me up, and Hans was kind of in front of me, just really trying to keep me calm and, keep me staying positive, because at this point I kind of feel like my doctor was not really being so positive. And again, I get that the baby was her concern, but the way that she was explaining things to me just wasn't in the most positive light. It wasn't helping me one bit stay positive. So Hans was doing that for me, and I was really glad to have the support that I did from my family and Hans. Luckily, being on all fours did help her heart rate just enough to where my doctor said she was okay with it. She was about to give me a shot that would stop my contractions. However, this shot kind of makes your heart go into, I guess, tachycardia. It makes your heart go a lot faster, and I already have a fast heart rate. My heart rate was already around 120, which is pretty normal for me, but that shot would have sent my heart flying up even higher, and my doctor was like, "You're young, you would be able to handle it." And I was terrified because I feel like she just was not hearing that, hello, I already have tachycardia. That shot is not a good idea. Like, honestly, if it came down to it, I feel like a C-section would have been better than having that shot. And a C-section was something I was terrified of. But I was even more terrified of the shot, which I can't think the name of it, but it stops your contractions. So, anyways, basically fast forward, I started feeling pressure again when I was on all fours, and so my doctor said, let's go ahead and check you, I guess. And luckily, I was at a 10, and her head was super low. And so my doctor basically said, okay, this is what we have to do. You need to get her out in like 2 pushes. There's a chance that I'm going to send you in to get a C-section if we can't get her out, because her heart rate was still really low. It was just that it was climbing up a little bit in between contractions a little bit better at this point. So she said also I'm going to have the vacuum nearby to, like, I guess, help get her out quicker. And she mentioned me getting an episiotomy, I think, so that she would come out quicker as well. I said okay to both of those. I said I would rather you use those if possible than a C-section. I said, but of course getting her out quick is my main goal as well. So I was pretty nervous because I didn't feel much other than pressure, and I was just scared that I was not going to be able to push her out in 2 pushes. But I was staying calm through this whole time, kind of by bringing myself to this meditative state. If you don't know, I am into meditating, and meditation has helped me immensely in the last couple years with anxiety. And so I was just bringing myself to that calm place, and I was able to stay calm and focused. And I got her out in 2 contractions, and I could not believe that I was able to do that. But she was out, and we figured out what the issue was with why her heart was going so low, and it was that she had a very short cord. And I've done some Googling since and found out some pretty crazy things about short cords and that I didn't know, and I'm curious as to why they didn't know that she had a short cord, you know, from all my ultrasounds. I had extra ultrasounds because apparently because of my age, I'm 35, and so they were doing a ton more monitoring. So that made me wonder why, you know, how they didn't know. Maybe that's not something to measure, I don't know. Anyways, that's a side note. So anyway, she was out, and once she was out, her heart rate was beautiful, and she was doing great. And I guess that kind of ends the birth story. I'm sure I left out lots of details, and if you didn't know, I do have a birth vlog that kind of just highlights some of these things I talked about, and I'll have that linked below. But all in all, I would say it was a pretty okay labor. The end was very scary, and it was a really, really long, drawn-out labor, especially that 6 hours where I was not progressing at all. But we did it. She's here, and I don't have to go through it again, thank goodness. And she's been doing wonderful ever since. We've definitely had a few challenges here and there, and I do talk about that a little bit in our 2-week checkup. And if you can't tell, I'm definitely tired, waking her up a lot to eat, so hopefully all of that made sense, and I am going to be excited to look back on this one day. I know a lot of you probably wanted to see her real quick too, and some of you requested to see her hair, so I'm going to show you real quick, even though she's kind of sleeping here. But she has pretty dark hair, but in the sun it almost looks like it would be blonde, so I guess you can see back here she has more hair. She's obviously sleeping, so I'm just kind of holding, and look at her adorable ears. She has little elf ears on both sides, and she is just perfect. I love you, sweet girl. Bye, guys.